Greetings! Okay, a quick follow-up video to the MPF video I put out, which has generated a fair bit of discussion. There are a number of comments, which I wish to opine upon. The following is purely my own personal response, uninformed by anything I have seen or heard in Detroit. 1. At 40 tons, it's not much of a light tank. Well, here's the thing. Nowhere in the specifications that I have seen did the Army say that they wanted a light tank. People are making the assumption that because it likely required a lighter vehicle than an M1, that they wanted a light tank, but that is on the folks making the assumption. Various people in the media may have called it a light tank, but that doesn't mean it's what the Army asked for. That is not the vehicle's problem. 2. At 42 tons, it's more or less in medium tank territory, so why not just use a medium tank? Refit old Leopard 1s, they're not much heavier and use the same cannon. Some have suggested Type 10 or even T80 as analogues for almost the same weight, although I admit I don't know if you can fit two Type 10s onto a C-17. Well, this comes down more to optimization for the role. I don't know exactly where the 42 tons go to, and even if it did, probably wouldn't be allowed to say, but I think you can draw some intelligent conclusions given we know, for example, it's not going on a bigger gun and larger ammo. Again, it's not a tank. It's as easy to say tank as anything else. Even I do it in a video, and I'm sure I'll do it again in the future. But in terms of the design, it's not a tank as we know it today. 3. The US Army has invented the stug. Yeah, pretty much. I'd argue that the MGS was also a stug in concept, an assault gun, which is why I led the video with that question. Now, maybe there are some very subtle differences in the concepts between MGS, MPF, stug, World War I heavy tanks, and maybe World War II infantry tanks, but it seems to me that generally speaking they're about as small as makes little difference. 4. Well, they should have just fixed and used MGS then. Well, think about it. This vehicle is primarily designed to operate in close conjunction with light infantry. There is almost nowhere that light infantry cannot go. And if you want to increase the chances of your supporting armored vehicle actually being able to go to where the fight is, be it in rubbled streets, rocky terrain, soft ground, or just being able to make neutral turns because of the space, you basically need tracks. 5. Okay, fine, whatever you want to call it, and whatever the role is, it's still 40 odd tons, way too heavy for an infantry division. Is it? A modern US infantry division isn't like the old World War II division, which I would add still had nearly 2,000 vehicles, granted mainly Jeeps and WCs, but it was still generally reliant upon external support to move troops from A to B who would otherwise be walking to the fight. But today's? No. Have a look at the weight of a Hemet PLS fully loaded. That's 40 tons. There are heavier Hemet variants out there as well, although I don't know if they're the infantry divisions. They will need Class 40 bridges to get across water obstacles, for example, just as MPF does. Yes, it does add another battalion's worth of heavy vehicles for the division to deal with, but it's not a completely new problem set in that context. 6. Either way, at 42 tons, they should have taken a 120mm cannon. Look at CV-90-120 or Centaur. They showed you can have a modern, full-size tank-killing gun on it. Well, as Lieutenant Colonel George observed, the 120mm was an option, yet the active choice was made to stick with the 105. I mean, it's worth noting that the CV-90-120, much though BAE has been flogging it for many years, has not yet been taken up by a customer. Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's necessarily a good idea in practice. For the problem set provided, the 105 is plenty good enough, and you can carry more rounds with you before you need to break contact to go to rearm. Yes, you do lose a little bit of tank killing capability, but you gain more where it's more likely to be useful. 7. Did you like the subtle cut there? Yeah, but what happens if it does meet a tank? Sure, it's not meant to be a tank fighter, but that assumes the enemy plays by those rules. Well, what happens if the current infantry division, pre-MPF, meets a tank? The infantry division isn't inherently supposed to be going up against the 7th Guards Tank Corps. That's part of the reason the Army has heavy divisions. But that doesn't mean that the current infantry division is going to roll over if an enemy tank or two comes along. Unlike in World War II, modern infantry units are very well equipped to deal with the occasional armoured problem which crops up. MPF more exists as an enhancement, not a sole capability provider. And yeah, the 105 isn't a 120, but most opposing vehicles will still find themselves at least threatened by a 105mm DU round. So unless you're engaging Type 99s frontally or the like, the MPF should be capable enough of engaging whatever shows up. It's a bit like the World War II argument of Shermans in the infantry support role. You still engaged whatever the infantry was having trouble with, be it a tank or a machine gun. 8. Okay, fine, it's not a tank, but it looks like a tank, so it should be used as one. See the TDs of World War II for precedent. Now, I'm not sure that's going to be the case, and I'm not sure it's a valid comparison anyway. The problem with the TDs being used as tanks was that they were being used in a role for which they were supremely unsuited, the close fight to support infantry. To this end, they didn't even have a coaxial or a hull machine gun. And that is manifestly not the case for MPF, which is specifically designed to fight and survive in that environment. I mean, that's its job. There's more chance of it being misused as a TD, honestly, in the event that the infantry division's javelins and tows don't do the job well enough already. If you were going to use it as a tank, including as a light tank, you would be adding roles such as rapid exploitation, raids, or maybe even recon or counter-recon. I doubt those assignments would be given to the vehicle absent the infantry it's supposed to be supporting anyway, and it's not as if the division is suddenly also equipped with APCs or IFVs for the Combined Arms Company team. 9. They really should have stuck a Crows up top instead of the flex mount. I personally agree with you, but since I wasn't involved in writing the specifications, designing the vehicle to meet dimensional requirements, or was I involved in the trials, my opinion on that is worth about as much as yours is. Not a hell of a lot. Maybe it'll sprout one later. 10. They should have selected the BAE vehicle instead. You say that, but you haven't seen my video on that one yet. Unlike the GDLS entry, I was allowed to film inside it. But I do need to reshoot a segment due to camera operator error, i.e. I screwed up, so it'll be another month or two yet before release. The vehicle had some very good and positive qualities, which you will see in the video, but overall, I think the appropriate vehicle was selected. For starters, I couldn't come up with a way of elegantly getting in or out of the thing, which is an immediate setback for me. Bonus comment! The Marines should get it since the M1 is gone. I don't think it was a matter of the weight as much that the Marines had to divest armour battalions in order to free up funds and manning for other capabilities. If the Marines really wanted a battalion of armour back, I presume they'd pick a battalion of M1s. So, basically, out of all that, I submit that they have actually thought about this a little bit. I'm sure the vehicle isn't perfect, but a lot of the complaints I've seen are, I think, a little bit unwarranted. Oh, and according to the comments of the video, the benefit of those slitted mud flaps is that it's harder for the mud to cake to it. I can see that. Finally, as a complete topic change, since Bradley and Marder have both come up in public discourse in the Ukrainian context, I might do a video on them in the near future, but for now, I would just observe that I do have Switchology videos up for both vehicles, so you can get an idea of just how good they both are, at least in terms of the firepower department and what they can bring to the fight. Look for the links below. All right, that's it. Take care.